What you're looking at here is a 2005 Nautique that has a Faria Gateway that has pitot tubes that run into it that would normally drive the speedometer. But in this case, those pitot tubes have been plugged, and there's a circuit board inside the gateway that's actually driving the analog speedometer to the left. And what you see is a GPS speedometer on the right. That's the Perfect Pass Stargazer, and then this speed adapter on the left driving the analog speedometer. So if you have a situation like this and you want to get rid of the pitot tubes, which is a really good idea, then this video could definitely be for you. So the first decision you have to make is which of these three options makes the most sense for your particular situation. A lot of it's going to depend on which model your boat, what type of boat you have, where the gateway is, whether or not you've upgraded to a Stargazer GPS system on your Perfect Pass, actually whether or not you have a Perfect Pass at all. So the first option is a paddle wheel input. This in a lot of cases is the best option because it works immediately. So the minute you start up your boat, you don't have to wait for the GPS to lock. It's pretty instantaneous. It's smooth, and it of course measures speed versus the water. So you know, if you live on a river, this may have some advantages with the current and such. The downside is it's not available in all of the configurations. So you'll have to see if you actually have a paddle wheel input. I believe boats of about a 2005 vintage started to put the paddle wheel in there, but not all of them are going to have it. The next option is if you did upgrade to the Stargazer from Perfect Pass, you'll have a GPS puck already there. That's actually a Garmin unit, and so you can just plug that straight into that particular system. That Garmin's very accurate. Measures speed against the ground, not the water. So you have to keep that in mind. Again, you have to wait for it to lock. So when you first start up your boat, it's going to take a minute or two to see the satellites and lock. So as you pull away from your dock or your trailer, you may not get speed immediately. And of course, you have to have upgraded to the Stargazer, otherwise it's not going to be available. So if one or two doesn't work for you, then the third option could be a good one. I'm offering an option of a GPS puck from a company called YIC. It works very well. Again, it's a completely standalone system. You do not have to have a Perfect Pass. It's very accurate against ground speed. But again, you have the same situation with GPS. It's going to take a minute to lock. There's a limited cable length, so you'll have to have a clear view of the sky from your gateway. Okay. So the gateway to the puck is going to be roughly 4 or 5 feet. So anyway, so you're going to have to pick one of those three, and the board in each case is different. The cable's different, so you're going to have to make that decision up front. Here's an example of an upgraded Stargazer unit. They all look a little bit different, but you can see what the paddle wheel input looks like. It's a 5-pin connector that plugs into the side, and of course right below that is the Garmin GPS plug. So in this case, actually either one of those would work, paddle wheel or Garmin GPS. Okay, so here's the actual circuit board. You'll see some wires that come off of it that we're going to talk about here in a bit. You'll also see a little dip switch at the bottom that we'll also talk about in a little bit. Here's a little hardware kit. You'll see some grommets to plug up the pitot tube holes. You'll see some spacers and some little screws to plug the board in. So what you'll get is one of 3 possible cables. The one on the right is used for the Garmin GPS input. So you'll basically disconnect your Garmin and plug this little jumper piece in, and then the other end will plug into your gateway. If you're running off a paddle wheel input, the cable will look very similar, but it'll have a 5-pin connector instead of the 3-pin connector that's shown here. The cable here on the left is the standalone YIC GPS unit. It's got a little adhesive strip on the back, and the same connector that plugs into the gateway in all cases. And it plugs into P7 of the gateway. So here's a actual gateway. That's P7 right there, and it's actually labeled on the top, so should be pretty obvious. These 3 pins are also included in the kit. You may or may not need them. That'll become obvious here in a second. Okay, tools you're going to need. You're going to need a soldering iron. Nothing special, just anything that you can do reasonably small electronics with. This has a little chisel tip, pretty beat up. Solder. This is 032 diameter, but you could use almost anything. Nothing special. I've got some solder wick stuff here to suck some solder out. You'll need something sort of like that, or possibly a solder sucker. Either or. I like to use the wick stuff. Works really well. You need some sort of tape. This is electrical tape. I think it's 3/4 wide, but you can cut it. That'll become apparent here in a minute. Phillips head screwdriver. This one's nice because it's got a reversible tip. You'll use one tip for the gateway and then possibly another tip to screw the board in. So any Phillips head screwdriver will work. Some kind of a cutting tool. This will help to open up the gateway. You're going to need pretty substantial wire clippers. They're actually not used to cut wire. They're going to be used to clip a piece of plastic inside your gateway. So anything that looks sort of like that. Needle nose pliers, always helpful for crimping wires and just general use. So this is kind of the bare minimum. I don't think you'll need anything really more than that. Oh, and you'll need a Torx T10 screwdriver, some sort of a driver to remove the little screws inside the gateway. This is the Faria Gateway pulled out of the boat. This will be mounted in a variety of places depending upon what type of boat you have. It can be mounted in the transom under one of the hatches, or underneath the dash area up in the cockpit. But you'll have to find where the gateway is, remove the connectors, and of course these flanges are used to mount the gateway to a bulkhead somewhere. So let's do quick orientation. There's a variety of connectors. Not all are used. They are Deutsch DT type connectors. I've got a handful here. These are all keyed, so you really can't put them in the wrong place. But you know, basically to remove them, you'll have a lever of some sort on the connector, and you just push down on that lever. Sometimes they're pretty stiff, pulled out. You know, this one would go into this connector, right? And it's got 2 levers, one on each side. Squeeze, pull, and it'll come out. Again, they're all keyed. You can't mess it up. Quick orientation. So there's actually a label here that tells you what connectors go to what. Again, not all of them are used, but essentially P1 is not used. P2 is actually the power and ground that power up the gateway. P3 right here is the Faria serial bus that goes out to the various gauges. These are obviously not used. They're plugged up. This triangular connector is the engine ECU data. So TAC data, temperature data, probably a bunch of other things come in through here on I believe a CAN bus. This connector obviously is not used because there's no pins. This connector is a variety of sensor inputs, things like nav lights, and a bunch of pins come in through there, a bunch of signals. This connector has the oil pressure, fuel temperature, not fuel temperature, fuel level, and a few others. I forget what this P13 is, but I'm not sure if that's used or not. But anyway, these are the pitot tube entries. You can see they've been plugged up, so obviously the speedometer doesn't work in this particular gateway because the pitot tubes are plugged. But anyway, so step one is we got to take it apart. There's 8 Phillips head screws. Those are all going to come out, so that's what we're going to do. Sometimes you can have kind of lock on, so they go tight. It's just starting by hand. Maybe. Once you just pull screws out, you see the screen stuff, water. All those screws. Put a little baggie on. Okay, so now we have to pull this panel off. What I suggest is starting with some sort of a razor blade, knife, X-Acto, whatever you want to call it. Go around this seam, press down, kind of work through both sides. Make sure you get all the way down. You'll see that there's a lip that this will bottom out on. You want to get all the way down to that lip if you can. I've already worked this a couple times, so I think it's pretty well loose. So once we've done all that, the best case scenario is that, we can just kind of pry it up and it'll come off. The worst case is that it won't do that. I've seen on the threads that in some cases people will take a cutting tool, Dremel tool of some sort, and go around this kind of to widen up this seam. You could introduce some kind of a solvent, alcohol, Gooby Gone, something down into that crack and let it sit and kind of let it release. I've taken apart a bunch of gateways. Most of them come apart pretty easily. I had one that I think might have been glued by an owner. I had a devil of a time. And so, you can put a small screwdriver in here, kind of pry. The problem you'll have is you'll break this lip, so you got to be careful not to pry too hard. Otherwise, this lip is pretty brittle, and you'll end up breaking it. But I don't think that even if you kind of mess it up a little bit, I don't think it's going to hurt anything. So anyway, again, I've worked this for a while, and I think it'll just kind of come apart. Yeah, it's coming off. So yeah, so it's coming apart. Be careful, just kind of lift, because you'll see that there's 2 boards inside here, 2 printed circuit boards. And so you want to be a little careful how you just don't rip this apart. Let's see if I can get, okay, you see I'm kind of unfolding it, and there's some flex circuits that connect these 2 boards together. This board down here is in a card guide, so we have to kind of lift that out. Maybe work it a little bit back and forth. There we go, I can see it moving. Let's slide that out of the card guide. See, it's a little bit of a struggle, but there you go. Okay, so that's out. We can set this aside, but you can see there's like a lip, there's some sealant goo that's in there. These are all the mounting holes that we remove the screws from. We're going to set that aside. And here's the guts. You can see there's 2 boards. This board interfaces to all the connectors. This board here has kind of the brains of the unit. If we flip it over, there's a bunch of circuitry. The next step is we need to remove this board from this faceplate. So there's 3 screws These are Torx T10. Those need to be removed. Pull them off. Again, those screws, very short. We're actually going to replace these screws with water ones. They're in the kit. But close them out. Now this will just slide off. You can see there's card guides here. Just pull that off, and there you go. These are actually the Pitot sensors. So they sense pressure and convert it to an electronic signal, which drives your speedometer. So unfortunately, they're not connected. Speedometer's not going to work. And this is really just a fitting. Okay, so we're gonna pull these out. Right, not going to use those. Pull them out, and here's what we're left with. The next thing we're going to do while we have this faceplate is we've got a couple of these rubber grommets, and we're going to plug up those holes. So they come with a little manufacturing thing here. I like to clip that off. I don't think that's totally necessary, but just to get rid of that, make it easier. And we're going to come in from this side. You can see there's kind of a flat side and an indented side. I'm not sure it really matters which way you put it in, but so we're just going to press that in. Bam. Do the other one. Press it in. Shape a little bit. Make sure the lips. Okay, we're done. If you look at your P7, if those pins are already populated, then you don't have to do this step. If they're not, you've got to go solder these 3 pins into that P7. And in some cases, there'll be solder in the holes that you'll have to suck out first. So use a solder wick or solder sucker, get that solder out, and then just simply solder these 3 pins in. Okay, so this next part's a little scary, but at this point you're committed, so you really don't have a choice. Remember, there's these 4 card guides. The third one from the left that you see me cutting, you're going to have to cut that off pretty much as flush as possible, and what that does is it makes room for the wires to come through, and that'll be obvious here in a second, but you got to cut that off. So right here is P10, it's a pressure transducer. So we're going to remove that, and since we're not going to reuse it, I'm just going to cut the pins, and then we'll take the strap off board. Okay, before we actually install the board, we need to pull some solder out of one of these pins so that we can inject the wire that has the signal on it. So that pin would be on this connector. So that's the middle one. There's basically 5 ribbon connectors here. That is P7. So if we start with the square pin, we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it's that pin right there. You can see the trace that's coming off. This was connected to our pressure transducer before. So what we're going to do, let me zoom in a little bit. Zoom it in. Again, it's that pin right there. And so what I like to do is just get the wick and get it good and hot. Stick it on there and just kind of see what we can make happen here. You can see the solder coming out. You really want to remove as much as possible so you have a place to stick the wire into. That's looking pretty good. So that's what you want to end up with. Okay, now we're ready to install the board. The board mounts to these 3 holes here. You can see there's matching holes on the board. So this is the way we're going to orient it. There's a wire coming off of here that we're going to stick in that hole. That actually injects the signal into the gateway to drive the speedometer. We'll do that in a second. And then these wires here actually get soldered to the back side of the board in various places. But what we're going to do is this is going to mount here. Got some spacers, got 3 screws. They fit into the existing housing. But what we're going to do is we're going to take these wires and we're going to kind of stuff them through this hole. Kind of like that. Get all of those wires through there. And you want this little piece of shrink wrap kind of protecting the wires in that hole. So you want to kind of maneuver the wires a little bit. There we go. Okay, so sort of like that. And then we can bend this back. And at this point we can't mount the board yet because we have to solder the wires. So what we're going to do is we're going to flip it over. Mount just a touch. So the red wire is power. So that's going to go over to that connector. The other 3 wires are going to go right here to those pins that we installed earlier. Okay, so I just want to kind of orient the wires kind of where I want them to go. Yes, this last part's a little hard to film, but essentially what I've done is I've taken the power wire and run it over to that pin right there. Okay, so that's P2, left bottom pin, and I kind of circled it around. You want to kind of slide it down to the bottom, okay, so it doesn't interfere with any of the plastic or anything. So just wrap it around, slide it down, and then these 3, the green one goes on the top, the blue one to the left, and then the black goes there. And you want to make sure that you have the wires below the little collar where it kind of widens, right? You want it, you know, down low, below the collar, right? And then all we're going to do is we're just going to solder that on, and we're almost done. Yeah, so here's what it looks like when it's done. It's not perfect, but nothing is shorted. We've got the wires very well soldered on. There's the power wire over here. And from this point, we should be good to go. So at this point, it's not a bad idea to do a quick check, get oriented. So we've got our board pin side down, got our frame, and we can just kind of see how this slides on here. So these are card guides, these plastic things. Of course, we snipped one of them off, but I don't really feel like we need it. So we just want to make sure that this slides down. Of course, these pins all have to fit through, you know, the holes in the frame. But you can see that we're sliding down. We can check, make sure that our wires aren't in the way or anything like that. But I think everything looks really good. So the next step is we're going to actually mount the board. And of course, we might want to put this wire through first. Give us a little space. So yeah, let's go ahead and remember, we sucked the solder out of that pin. We're going to slide that wire into the hole. That was another part that was a little bit hard to film, but you can see we have inserted that wire It's already down. It's pretty solid. Again, that's pin 7. So we haven't mounted it, but we've got the board just kind of free here. And the next step would be to actually mount it. So this next part, it's a little bit fiddly, but what I like to do is kind of look straight down on the board and get the 3 holes, the 3 mounting holes lined up with the holes underneath. And then what we're going to do is we're going to slide one of these little spacer things in there. Maybe get something pointy and sharp. Kind of get it lined up with the hole. And then you can drop a screw down and see if you can get it threaded. There we go, that was pretty easy. You want to keep it loose though, because you got to get the other 2 in there, right? So there's one in here. So we're gonna see if we can get that one lined up. I kind of messed that all up. Got away from me. There it is. But yeah, you can just kind of position it around till it's lined up. And then we just drop a screw down. See if we can get that one threaded. Oh, 2 in a row. And finally this top one. Slide that in there. Drop the screw. And it wasn't that hard at all. You don't get carried away because you're screwing in the plastic, but I'm going to snug these down a little bit. And that's pretty much it. At this point, it's not a bad idea to put this little piece of tape on. This is about a 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch or so. And what that does is when you fold that board on top of those wires, it just kind of protects the wires a little bit. Not completely necessary, but not a bad idea. So let's talk about these little switches for a second. The bottom line is you won't need them. They're used for speed calibration, which can be done within the speedometer, which I'll show you here in a second. So just leave all the switches in the down position, and again, you will not use these. Yeah, the other little tidbit is when this is inside the housing box, this board here is going to slide into these 3 card guides. And so you want to make sure that these wires are kind of out of the way, so you don't like have problems with them. But I think that's pretty good there. Now all we got to do is just put it back together. So the way this fits in is, I believe it goes like that. There's actually a little thing for the capacitor. Just kind of work it until it goes all the way down. And there we are. Oh, we didn't film that very well. Then we just put the 8 screws back in.
Okay, at this point you're ready to mount your gateway back into your boat. So get that put back, and then again, this connector in all cases, no matter what kind of cable you have, you plug into P7. So just like that, jam it in all the way until it clicks. Of course, you'll have to reconnect all your other connectors as well. The other end of the cable, if you have the GPS, you're going to find your GPS connection, which will be at your perfect pass. You're going to disconnect that GPS connection and basically plug this jumper in between the cable and the perfect pass. If you have a paddle wheel, it's going to be exactly the same. These are going to be 5 pins instead of 3. So just, again, connect this in between that connector. And then if you have the standalone, all you've got to do is plug that into your gateway and then mount this somewhere. Obviously, the best spot is direct view of the sky, but I think that you can probably get away with mounting it under a fiberglass bulkhead, but I haven't actually tried that, so just be careful with that. If you have a paddle wheel or GPS and your gateway is in the transom, this cable will be very long. So you're going to have to tell me, hey, I need a 20-foot cable. Standard 25-foot cable is about what you need, again, if your gateway is in the transom.
Okay, this is the very final step. Assuming you have your gateway installed and your speedometer needle is moving, then everything is working perfectly. The final step, if needed, is to calibrate the speedometer to a GPS reference. And so if you have that GPS reference and your speedometer needle is reading a mile or two up or down, then it's very easy to go into the speedometer calibration itself, and you can increase the speed, I think up to about 5 miles an hour, or decrease the speed up to about 5 miles an hour. And this document's available online. You can find it for your boat. Just Google Faria speedometer calibration or something like that. But anyway, the document's available. But this is basically the procedure. Just follow the procedure, and you can get your speedometer needle to read very accurately against a GPS reference. That's it, and I hope you found this somewhat interesting. And I apologize for being a little bit long-winded, but it's a fairly technical subject. If you are interested in this concept, there's some links below and how to reach me, and hopefully we can keep this era of boats on the water.